Have you ever trusted someone completely, only to discover they were selling pieces of you the entire time? Maybe you're watching this from somewhere that still feels safe, a place where doctors are healers and privacy means something. Hold on to that feeling, because I'm about to tell you how quickly everything you believe can shatter. The photographs are spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene, which, Isla would realize later, is exactly what they were. Her hands freeze halfway to her wine glass. The ambient noise of the restaurant fades to a distant hum. She can't breathe. She can't think. Because there, among the papers and manila folders on the corner table 15 feet away, are images of herself. Images that should not exist outside of a medical office. Images she never consented to having taken. She's staring at them, her brain refusing to process what her eyes are showing her. When the man studying those photographs looks up, his gaze locks with hers across the crowded restaurant, and something shifts in his expression. Recognition, not of her face, but of her reaction. He knows that she knows. But let's back up. Let's talk about how Isla Thorne ended up at Soralina on a Thursday night in October, about to have her entire world turned inside out. 6 hours earlier, she'd been finishing her shift at Boston Children's Hospital, peeling off her scrubs in the staff locker room, and checking her phone. 37 messages in the group chat, all from her friends coordinating Becca's birthday dinner. The reservation was at 8. Dress code was nice. Isla had exactly 90 minutes to get home to her apartment in Alston, shower off the particular exhaustion that came from spending 10 hours caring for sick children, and make herself presentable. She loved her job, truly loved it, in a way that made the student loans and long hours worth it. Pediatric nurse practitioners didn't get rich, but they got something better. They got to be the calm voice in a chaotic moment, the steady hands that could start in 4 on a dehydrated toddler, the translator between terrified parents and busy physicians. At 28, Isla had found her calling. What she hadn't found was much of a personal life, which was why Becca's birthday dinner felt important. She needed to show up, be present, pretend for a few hours that she was more than her career. Her friends from nursing school had scattered across the country, but the local group still made an effort, still tried to maintain the connections that had sustained them through impossible rotations and brutal exams. The restaurant Becca had chosen was ambitious. Soralina was the kind of place where appetizers cost $30 and the wine list required a sommelier to navigate. Isla arrived 7 minutes late, slightly out of breath, wearing the one dress she owned that could pass for upscale. Black, simple, appropriate. She'd twisted her auburn hair into something approximating elegance and swiped on lipstick in the Uber. The hostess led her through the dining room toward a long table where 8 women were already laughing over cocktails. The space was beautiful in that careful way expensive restaurants achieved, all warm lighting, an exposed brick, and the kind of atmosphere that made conversations feel important. Isla slid into the empty seat between Becca and Monica, accepting a menu and a glass of Prosecco that appeared immediately. For an hour, everything was normal. Perfect, even. They ordered too much food, the way groups of women always did, planning to share everything. They caught up on jobs and relationships and the particular drama of their respective hospital systems. Isla found herself relaxing, the tension of her shift finally releasing from her shoulders. This was good. This was what she needed. She excused herself to use the restroom around 9:30, navigating through the crowded dining room. The restaurant was packed, every table full of well-dressed Bostonians enjoying expensive meals. On her way back, her attention snagged on a corner booth that had been empty earlier. 4 men sat there now, and they looked different from the other diners. More severe, more watchful. 3 of them were clearly subordinates, their body language deferential. But the 4th man commanded the space in a way that made Isla's steps slow without conscious decision. He was probably in his mid-30s, wearing a suit that looked custom-made, the kind of tailoring that suggested serious wealth. Dark hair, olive skin, strong features that would have been handsome if not for the absolute coldness in his expression. He was listening to one of the other men talk, his attention focused on something spread across the table between them. Isla's gaze dropped to those papers, just casual curiosity from someone passing by. And then her entire world stopped. Photographs. Multiple photographs, visible even from her angle. And she knew those images. Knew them because she was in them, wearing a medical gown, positioned on an examination table, taken from angles that made her stomach turn. The shock hit like physical force. Her hand reached for the nearest wall, needing something solid to keep her upright. This wasn't possible. Those photos were from her appointments with Dr. Brennan, the gynecologist she'd been seeing for the past 6 months. Routine visits. Standard care. He'd said the photographs were for medical records, for documentation, completely normal practice. Completely normal practice that was now spread across a table in a restaurant, being examined by men in expensive suits. Her vision tunneled. She couldn't process this. Couldn't understand how those images had traveled from a doctor's office to this moment. Her mind kept stuttering over the impossibility while her body remained frozen in the narrow space between tables. That's when the man at the center of the booth looked up. His eyes, she would remember later, were an unusual gray-green, the color of the Atlantic before a storm. They met hers with immediate intensity, and she watched awareness dawn across his face. He was intelligent, she could see that. Intelligent enough to read her expression, to follow her horrified gaze to the photographs, to understand exactly what he was seeing. She should move, should return to her table, pretend this wasn't happening, protect herself through denial. But her body wouldn't cooperate. She stood there, trembling, while this dangerous-looking stranger assessed her with those cold, calculating eyes. He said something sharp to the men with him, his voice too low for her to hear. They immediately began gathering the papers, the photographs, sliding everything into folders with practiced efficiency. Within seconds, the table was clear. Within 10 seconds, the 3 subordinates were standing, moving away toward the exit. The man remained seated, his gaze still locked on Isla. Then he gestured to the empty booth across from him, a clear invitation. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run. This man was dangerous. She could read it in every line of his posture, in the way other diners gave his table unconscious distance, in the immediate obedience of the men who'd fled at his command. Whatever he was involved in, it wasn't legal. It wasn't safe. But he had those photographs. He had images that should not exist, that she had never consented to having taken, that represented a violation she was only beginning to comprehend. And she needed to understand how. Needed to know what he was doing with them. Isla's feet carried her forward before her brain could override the decision. She slid into the booth across from him, her hands clenched in her lap to hide their shaking. Up close, he was even more imposing. Broad shoulders, expensive cologne, and an aura of controlled violence that made her heart race. "You recognize them," he said. His voice was deep, accented faintly with something Eastern European. It wasn't a question. Isla's throat felt tight. "Those are mine. Those photos. They're from my medical appointments." His jaw tightened, something flashing across his face too quickly to identify. Anger, maybe. Or disgust. "When did you have these appointments? Why do you have them?" The question came out sharper than she intended, fear translating into aggression. "Who are you? What are you doing with private medical photographs?" He leaned back slightly, studying her with unsettling focus. "My name is Dante Volkov. Those photographs came into my possession tonight through a transaction I was investigating. A transaction involving medical blackmail and exploitation." The words took several seconds to penetrate. Medical blackmail. Exploitation. Her doctor had taken intimate photographs without her real consent, and then what? Sold them? Distributed them? The implications made her nauseous. "I need you to tell me about your doctor," Dante continued, his tone gentler now, but no less intense. "Everything. When you started seeing him, what he told you about the photographs, any behavior that seemed inappropriate." Isla's friends. She'd completely forgotten her friends, forgotten she was supposed to be celebrating a birthday. She glanced over her shoulder toward their table. Monica was watching with concerned curiosity, clearly wondering who Isla was talking to. "I can't," Isla started, then stopped. Couldn't what? Couldn't sit here talking to a strange man about her violated privacy? Couldn't ignore this now that she knew? Couldn't go back to her normal dinner and pretend those photographs didn't exist? "You're in danger," Dante said flatly. "If your doctor is selling these images, if he's part of a larger operation, then you can identify him. You're a witness. A liability." The restaurant suddenly felt too warm, too crowded. Isla's hands were definitely shaking now. Visible tremors she couldn't control. "I need to go back to my friends." He didn't stop her, but something in his expression suggested he'd expected the reaction. He reached into his jacket, extracted a business card, slid it across the table. When you realize how serious this is, call me. I can help. Isla took the card without looking at it, standing on legs that felt unsteady. She made it back to her table somehow, managing a smile that probably looked deranged. The rest of dinner passed in a blur. She barely tasted the food, couldn't track the conversations, kept touching the business card in her purse like a talisman. Becca asked if she was okay. Isla lied and said she was fine, just tired from her shift. The excuse was accepted because her friends knew her job, knew the toll it took. They'd all been there, grinding through residencies and new positions that demanded everything. She left early, claiming an early morning. Took an Uber back to her apartment in Allston, staring out the window at the familiar streets. Boston at night, students and young professionals filling the bars and restaurants. Everyone living their normal lives. Everyone except her, apparently. Her apartment was on the third floor of a converted triple-decker, the kind of housing that defined the neighborhood. Small but hers, decorated with care on a limited budget. She'd lived here for 3 years, ever since finishing her master's program. It had always felt safe. Isla unlocked the door and knew immediately that something was wrong. The lights were off, which was normal, but the air felt different, disturbed somehow. She stood in the doorway, hands still on the knob, her pulse suddenly thundering in her ears. Should she go in? Call the police? She was probably being paranoid, letting that conversation in the restaurant infect her perception. She flicked the light switch. The living room looked normal at first glance. Same second-hand couch, same bookshelf crammed with medical texts and paperback novels, same prints on the walls. But the coffee table had been moved slightly, and her desk drawer was open an inch when she always left it closed. Someone had been here. Isla's breath came faster. She moved through the apartment on shaking legs, checking each room. Nothing obviously missing, but signs everywhere of careful searching. Drawers not quite closed. Closet doors slightly ajar. Her jewelry box opened and carelessly shut. In her bedroom, propped against her pillow, was a single sheet of paper. The message was printed in standard font, impersonal and all the more terrifying for it. Keep quiet about what you saw. Keep quiet about your appointments. Tell no one. There will not be a second warning. Isla's knees gave out. She sat hard on her bed, staring at that message, and finally let herself understand. Dr. Brennan had violated her, had taken photographs without real consent, probably of dozens or hundreds of women, had sold or distributed those images. And now someone knew she could identify him, knew she'd seen evidence of his crimes, and was threatening her into silence. The business card was still in her purse. Isla retrieved it with shaking hands, stared at the name embossed in simple text. Dante Volkov. No title, just a phone number. When you realize how serious this is, he'd said. She realized. Isla picked up her phone, her fingers fumbling over the screen. It took 3 attempts to dial correctly. The phone rang once, twice. She was about to hang up when his voice answered, alert despite the late hour. Mr. Volkov? Her voice cracked. This is Isla, from the restaurant. I think I need your help. There was a brief pause. Then his response came swift and certain. Give me your address. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't leave your apartment. Don't open the door for anyone but me. The call ended. Isla sat on her bed, staring at that threatening message, and waited for a dangerous stranger to rescue her from something she still barely understood. Outside her window, Boston continued its normal Thursday night rhythms. Oblivious to the way her world had just shattered into pieces she didn't know how to put back together. 20 minutes felt like hours. She couldn't sit still, pacing her small apartment while her mind spun through implications. How many photos had Dr. Brennan taken? How many women had he violated? Where were those images now? Who had seen them? The questions multiplied faster than answers could form. When the knock came, firm and authoritative, Isla checked the peephole before opening. Dante stood in the hallway with 2 other men, all of them radiating the same controlled danger she'd noticed in the restaurant. She unlocked the door with trembling fingers. Dante's gaze swept over her, assessing. Show me what happened. She led them inside, hyper-aware of how small her apartment must seem to men like these. The displacement was subtle enough that she might have missed it if she hadn't been looking, but Dante's companions identified the signs immediately. One of them photographed everything with professional efficiency, while the other checked her windows and locks. Dante read the threatening note, his expression hardening with each word. Did you touch this? Only the edges. I dropped it as soon as I read it. Good. He slid it into a plastic bag one of his men provided, then turned his full attention to Isla. You can't stay here. Your apartment isn't secure, and whoever left this message knows where you live. The reality of the situation crashed over her again. I have work tomorrow. I have patients who need me. I can't just disappear. You don't have a choice. Dante's voice was firm, but not unkind. Your doctor has connections to people who are willing to threaten you, break into your home, and potentially do worse. Until we neutralize that threat, you need protection. From you? The question emerged before she could stop it, skepticism and fear mixing in her tone. His gaze met hers steadily. From me. One of his men cleared his throat. Boss, we should move. If they're watching the building, we don't want to stay static. Dante nodded, then looked back at Isla. Pack a bag. Essentials only, enough for a few days. We need to leave now. She wanted to argue, to insist this was insane, that she couldn't just leave her life behind because of some threatening note. But the fear was too real, too immediate. Those photographs existed. Someone had broken into her home. The danger Dante described wasn't hypothetical. Isla grabbed a duffel from her closet and moved through her apartment in a daze, collecting clothes and toiletries. Her hands were still shaking. Everything felt surreal, like she was watching herself from outside her body. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been whether she could afford new running shoes. Now she was fleeing her home with a man she'd met 2 hours ago because someone was threatening her over medical photographs she never should have posed for. Ready, she said finally, the bag heavy on her shoulder. Dante gestured toward the door. Stay between us. Don't speak to anyone. If I tell you to move, you move immediately. Understood? Isla nodded, her throat too tight for words. They descended the stairs in formation, Isla surrounded by these dangerous men who moved with military precision. The street was quiet, most of her neighbors already asleep. A black SUV waited at the curb, engine running. One of Dante's men opened the rear door and Isla climbed in, her duffel clutched against her chest like armor. Dante slid in beside her while his companions took the front seats. The vehicle pulled away from her apartment smoothly, and Isla watched her building disappear in the side mirror. She didn't know when she'd see it again. Didn't know if she'd ever feel safe there again. Where are we going? Her voice sounded small in the leather interior. My penthouse. It's secure and monitored. You'll be safe there while we handle this. Handle this. Such a simple phrase for something that felt impossibly complex. Isla leaned her head back against the seat, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming. The adrenaline that had sustained her through the past hour was fading, leaving her hollowed out and shaking. She felt Dante's gaze on her and turned to meet it. Even in the dim interior, his eyes were striking, that unusual gray-green that seemed to see too much. I'm going to find everyone involved in this, he said quietly. Your doctor, whoever he's working with, whoever threatened you. And I'm going to make sure they never hurt anyone again. The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. This man was clearly someone who operated outside the law, who solved problems with methods she probably didn't want to know about. But instead of fear, Isla felt something else. Something like hope. Why? The question emerged before she could consider it. Why do you care? You don't know me. This isn't your problem. Dante's expression shifted, something painful flickering across his features before his control reasserted itself. I have my reasons. Let's leave it at that for now. The SUV navigated through Boston streets, heading toward the harbor and the expensive high-rises that lined the waterfront. Isla stared out the window and tried to process everything that had happened. This morning she'd been a nurse practitioner with a normal, unremarkable life. Tonight she was under the protection of a man who terrified her almost as much as the people threatening her. She touched her purse where his business card still rested and wondered, not for the first time, if trusting Dante Volkov was the smartest decision she'd ever made or the most dangerous mistake of her life. Either way, there was no going back now. The penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a glass tower overlooking Boston Harbor. Isla stepped out of the private elevator into a space that belonged in an architecture magazine, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows that transformed the city lights into a glittering backdrop. The furniture was modern and expensive, the kind of pieces that looked like art installations. Everything was immaculate, professionally decorated, and somehow completely impersonal. "This is where you live?" The question emerged before she could stop it, her exhaustion stripping away the filter between thought and speech. Dante set her duffel down near the entrance, his movements efficient. "This is where I sleep occasionally. I wouldn't call it living." One of his men, the older one with silver threading through his dark hair, cleared his throat. "I'll do a perimeter check, boss. Make sure building security knows the situation." Dante nodded. "Thank you, Alexei. Have Victor monitor the surveillance feeds. I want to know if anyone even looks at this building wrong." The two men disappeared, leaving Isla alone with Dante in this enormous space that felt more like a museum than a home. She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly aware of how out of place she was. Her clearance rack dress and department store shoes didn't belong here any more than she did. Dante seemed to sense her discomfort. He shrugged out of his suit jacket, draping it over the back of a chair, and rolled up his sleeves. The gesture made him slightly less intimidating, revealed forearms that were muscled and marked with what looked like old scars. "Come, I'll show you the guest room. Then we need to talk." She followed him through the penthouse, trying not to gape at the sheer scale of it. The kitchen was something from a professional chef's dreams, all stainless steel and marble. The living area could have hosted 50 people comfortably. Artwork that looked expensive hung on the walls, abstract pieces that probably cost more than her annual salary. He led her down a hallway to a bedroom that was larger than her entire apartment. The bed was massive, dressed in white linens that looked impossibly soft. More windows, more view, more evidence of wealth that made her head spin. "Bathroom is through there," Dante said, gesturing to a door. "You'll find everything you need. I'll have someone bring appropriate clothing tomorrow. For now, there should be a robe you can use." Isla set her duffel on the bed, her hands still trembling slightly. "I need to call work. Tell them I won't be in tomorrow." "Already handled." Dante's voice was matter-of-fact. "I had my assistant contact the hospital, explained you had a family emergency, and would be taking personal leave." She spun to face him, anger flaring through the fear and exhaustion. "You can't just make decisions for me. I have patients who depend on me. Responsibilities." His expression didn't change, but something in his eyes softened fractionally. "Your patients will be covered by other qualified professionals. You can't help anyone if you're dead." The bluntness of it hit like cold water. Isla sank onto the edge of the bed, the fight draining out of her. "This is insane. Yesterday I was normal. I had a normal life. Yesterday you didn't know your doctor was violating your trust and selling proof of it." Dante moved to lean against the doorframe, his posture casual, but his attention focused entirely on her. "I know this is overwhelming. I know you want your life back. But right now, your safety is the priority." She wanted to argue, to insist she could handle this herself, call the police like a normal person. But the memory of that threatening note was too fresh, the violation too raw. "Who are you? Really?" "A businessman." His tone suggested the answer was both true and inadequate. Businessmen don't travel with armed security and have people call them boss. Isla met his gaze steadily, drawing on reserves of courage she didn't know she possessed. "If I'm trusting you with my safety, I deserve to know what I'm getting into." Dante was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those unsettling eyes. "Fair enough. I run import operations, primarily luxury goods from Eastern Europe. Some of my business is entirely legitimate. Some operates in gray areas. I have connections to people most would consider criminals, and I've done things you probably don't want to know about." The honesty was almost more frightening than evasion would have been. "So you're not just a businessman?" "No." He pushed away from the doorframe. "But I'm also not your enemy. Whatever else I am, I protect the people under my care. And right now, that includes you." Isla wanted to ask more, to understand exactly what kind of man she'd invited into her crisis. But exhaustion was pulling at her, making her thoughts fuzzy. "How long do I have to stay here?" "Until I neutralize the threat. Could be days, could be longer." Dante's expression was grim. "These operations don't dismantle quickly." A thought struck her, sharp and terrifying. How many women? How many others did he do this to? "I don't know yet, but I intend to find out." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Wash up, change into something comfortable. I'll order food. We need to talk in detail about your appointments, everything you remember. The more information I have, the faster I can end this." He left before she could respond, pulling the door closed behind him. Isla sat on the expensive bed in the expensive room and tried to process the surreal turn her life had taken. 24 hours ago, her biggest concern had been coordinating Becca's birthday dinner. Now she was hiding in a penthouse with a man who casually admitted to criminal connections because her doctor had violated her in ways she was only beginning to comprehend. She forced herself to stand, to move into the bathroom that was larger than her bedroom at home. The shower had multiple heads and controls that looked like they required an engineering degree. She stripped off her dress and stood under water hot enough to sting, trying to wash away the feeling of violation that clung to her skin. Dr. Brennan had seemed so professional, middle-aged, competent, recommended by her primary care physician. He'd explained that detailed photographic documentation was standard practice for tracking changes over time, for maintaining thorough records. She believed him because why wouldn't she? He was a doctor. Doctors were supposed to be trustworthy. The water ran cold before she finished processing that particular betrayal. Isla dried off with towels so soft they felt like clouds, then wrapped herself in the robe Dante had mentioned. It was too large, clearly meant for someone his size, but clean and warm. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found Dante in the kitchen. He'd changed into jeans and a black sweater, the casual clothing somehow making him look more dangerous rather than less. Without the suit's formality, the strength of his build was more apparent, the way he moved with predatory grace. He was cooking, she realized with surprise. Actually cooking, not ordering takeout or having staff prepare something. The smell of garlic and olive oil filled the air. "I thought you were ordering food," she said, hovering at the edge of the kitchen. "I changed my mind." Dante didn't look up from whatever he was sautéing. "You've had enough strangers in your life tonight. Sit." It wasn't really a suggestion. Isla slid onto one of the bar stools at the massive kitchen island, watching him work. His movements were efficient, confident, the actions of someone who knew his way around a kitchen despite the wealth that could easily afford private chefs. "Where did you learn to cook?" "My mother insisted. Said no son of hers would grow up helpless." He added something to the pan that sizzled. "She's Russian, very traditional about certain things." The mention of family humanized him slightly. Isla pulled the robe tighter around herself, hyper-aware that she was wearing nothing underneath, that this man was a stranger despite the intimacy of the current situation. "What are you making?" "Pasta aglio e olio." "Simple, but you need to eat something." They fell into silence, Isla watching him cook while her mind circled endlessly around the events of the evening. The photographs, the break-in, the threatening note. How had her life spiraled so completely out of control in a matter of hours? Dante plated the pasta with the same efficiency he applied to everything else, setting a bowl in front of her along with a glass of wine. "Eat. Then we talk." The food was better than it had any right to be, simple but perfectly executed. Isla realized she was starving, hadn't eaten properly at the restaurant before everything imploded. She made it halfway through the bowl before her stomach rebelled, the stress catching up with her appetite. "Tell me about the appointments," Dante said, his own food barely touched. "Start from the beginning. When did you first see this doctor?" Isla set down her fork, her hands clenching in her lap. 6 months ago. I needed a new gynecologist after mine retired. My primary care doctor recommended Dr. Brennan. Said he was thorough, experienced, took most insurance. And the first appointment? Was normal. Standard examination, health history, discussion about birth control options. Nothing that raised any concerns. The memory felt tainted now, overlaid with the knowledge of what had been happening without her awareness. When did the photographs start? Dante's voice was carefully controlled, but she could hear the anger underneath. The second appointment. He said it was his practice to maintain detailed photographic records, that it helped track any changes or abnormalities over time. He made it sound so clinical, so professional. Isla's voice cracked. I trusted him. Did he show you the photographs? Let you see what he was taking? No. He said they went directly into my secure medical file, that patient privacy was his top priority. The irony of that particular lie made her want to scream. How could I have been so stupid? Dante's hand shot out, catching her wrist gently but firmly. You weren't stupid. You trusted a medical professional who exploited that trust. That's on him, not you. The unexpected kindness in his voice, the validation, broke something loose in Isla's chest. Tears she'd been holding back since seeing those photographs spilled over. How many appointments? How many times did he do this? I had 4 appointments total. Every 3 months for routine monitoring. She wiped at her face, angry at the tears. And I just lay there while he violated me, thinking it was normal medical care. Dante released her wrist, standing to retrieve tissues from somewhere. He set them in front of her without comment, giving her space to compose herself. When she looked up, his expression was controlled fury. I need you to tell me everything you remember about his office. Staff you interacted with, security measures, anything unusual you noticed. Can you do that? Isla nodded, taking a shaky breath. The office was in a medical building near Mass General. 3rd floor. There was a receptionist, older woman, very professional. A nurse who did intake, younger, blonde, always seemed nervous. She walked him through every detail she could remember, the layout of the waiting room, the examination rooms, the way Dr. Brennan always had his phone positioned on a shelf during examinations. That detail made her stomach turn now, wondering if it had been recording, if there were videos in addition to photographs. Dante listened without interruption, his focus absolute. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. What were you doing with those photographs tonight? Isla asked. At the restaurant, before you saw me. Meeting with an informant. Someone who'd heard about a medical blackmail operation running through the city. He had samples of the material being sold, proof of the scope. Your photographs were part of that sample. Dante's jaw tightened. When I saw you recognize them, I knew we'd found a direct victim who could identify the source. So this is bigger than just my doctor. Much bigger. This is an organized operation, multiple doctors across the city, possibly the region. Thousands of women. Millions in profits from selling the images to various markets. He met her eyes. Your doctor is part of a network, and networks have people who protect them. The people who broke into my apartment. Who left that note. Yes. Isla felt cold despite the warm robe. What do they do to witnesses who don't stay quiet? Dante's silence was answer enough. She stood abruptly, needing to move, to do something with the fear coursing through her. The windows drew her attention, the vast expanse of glass overlooking the harbor. Boston stretched out below, familiar and foreign all at once. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights were other women, other victims who had no idea their most vulnerable moments had been commodified and sold. I want to help. Her voice was stronger than she felt. Not just hide here while you handle everything. I need to be part of stopping this. She heard Dante move behind her, felt his presence before he spoke. It's dangerous. I'm already in danger. Isla turned to face him. At least let me do something useful with it. He studied her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Terror. Passivity. Most people would be paralyzed right now. His voice carried a note of respect. You're processing trauma by trying to fight back. Is there another option? Plenty. None of them useful. A ghost of something that might have been a smile crossed his face. All right. Tomorrow we start gathering everything we can on your doctor and his operation. You help with that. But you follow my instructions exactly when it comes to safety. Understood? Isla nodded, feeling something like purpose cutting through the fear. What happened to you? She asked quietly. You said you had your reasons for caring about this. What are they? Dante's expression shuddered, the moment of connection evaporating. His sister died 10 years ago because someone exploited her trust and used it to destroy her. That's all you need to know. But it wasn't all. Isla could see that. There was pain buried deep in those words, a wound that hadn't healed. Before she could push, he stepped back. You should sleep. Tomorrow starts early. He moved toward the hallway, then paused. Your room locks from the inside if it makes you feel safer. But I'll be awake, monitoring security feeds. Nothing will get past me. He disappeared before she could respond, leaving her alone in his enormous sterile penthouse. Isla returned to the guest room, locked the door as he'd suggested, and climbed into the massive bed. The sheets were as soft as they'd looked, expensive cotton that should have been comfortable. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw those photographs spread across the restaurant table, saw Dr. Brennan's professional smile, felt the violation all over again. Her mind wouldn't quiet, spinning through implications and fears and questions that had no good answers. Hours passed. Isla could hear Dante moving through the penthouse, his footsteps quiet but present. At 2 in the morning, she heard water running. At 3, She heard him on the phone, his voice too low to make out words, but the tone suggesting dangerous business. She wondered what kind of man operated on her schedule, running an empire or organization or whatever he called it at hours when normal people slept. Wondered what he was really doing to investigate the medical blackmail ring. Wondered if trusting him was the smart choice or simply the only choice available. The sky was beginning to lighten over the harbor when exhaustion finally pulled her under. Her last conscious thought was that she'd placed her safety, her trust, her violated privacy in the hands of a man who admitted to being a criminal. And somehow, impossibly, she felt safer than she had in her own apartment. Whatever that said about her judgment or her situation, Isla was too tired to analyze. Sleep claimed her finally, deep and dreamless. While Dante Volkov kept watch over a woman he'd known for less than 12 hours, but had already decided to protect with everything he had. The smell of coffee pulled Isla from sleep, rich and dark enough to penetrate her exhaustion. She opened her eyes to unfamiliar surroundings, the guest room's floor-to-ceiling windows revealing morning light over Boston Harbor. For a disoriented moment, she couldn't place where she was. Then memory crashed back. The photographs. The threat. Dante Volkov's penthouse. She'd slept maybe 4 hours total, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion somewhere around dawn. The bedside clock showed 9:30, later than she'd slept in years. Guilt immediately surfaced. She should be at work, should be seeing patients, should be living her normal life instead of hiding in a criminal's penthouse. Isla forced herself out of bed, finding her duffel where she'd left it. She pulled on jeans and a sweater, ran her fingers through her tangled auburn hair, and ventured out into the penthouse. The coffee smell led her toward the kitchen, but voices stopped her in the hallway. Dante was in what she assumed was his office, the door open enough for her to see multiple monitors displaying what looked like surveillance footage and documents. He sat behind a sleek desk, phone pressed to his ear, speaking rapid Russian. His tone was clipped, authoritative, the voice of someone issuing orders. Isla hesitated, not wanting to interrupt, but uncertain whether she should retreat. The decision was made for her when Dante glanced up, registering her presence. He said something final into the phone and ended the call. "Coffee is fresh," he said, gesturing toward the kitchen. "Help yourself. I'll brief you in 5 minutes." She nodded and retreated, finding the kitchen with its intimidating professional setup. The coffee pot was blessedly straightforward, and she poured herself a large mug, adding cream from a refrigerator that looked like it cost more than her car. The first sip was perfect, strong, and exactly what she needed. Dante appeared moments later, carrying a tablet and looking like he hadn't slept at all. His hair was slightly disheveled, his sweater wrinkled, but his eyes were sharp and focused. He poured his own coffee, then gestured for her to follow him to the living area. They sat on opposite ends of the massive sectional couch, Isla curling her legs under herself while Dante set the tablet on the coffee table between them. "I've been working since 3, he said without preamble. "Called in favors, access databases that aren't exactly public. Here's what we know." He pulled up images on the tablet, and Isla's stomach clenched as she recognized medical office layouts, staff photos, documents with redacted sections. "This is bigger than we thought," Dante continued. "Dr. Brennan is part of a network spanning at least 12 medical practices across New England. They've been operating for approximately 4 years. For years." Isla's voice came out hollow. "How many women? Conservative estimate based on appointment volumes?" Dante's jaw tightened. "Several thousand. They target specific demographics. Professional women, typically between 25 and 40, with good insurance and stable careers. People unlikely to share intimate medical details with others." The calculation behind it made Isla feel sick. They chose us deliberately. Chose victims who would be too embarrassed or private to compare experiences. Exactly. The images are sold through encrypted channels to various buyers. Some for blackmail, some for pure exploitation. His expression darkened. "Your photographs showed up in a sample pack being shopped to a new buyer. That's how I became aware of this specific operation." Isla set her coffee down, her hands shaking too much to hold it steady. "We have to stop them. All of them. Not just Dr. Brennan. That's the plan. But it takes time, careful coordination. These operations have protection, people invested in keeping them running." He watched her carefully, assessing her reaction. "How are you holding up?" The The question surprised her with its gentleness. I'm angry, terrified, violated in ways I'm still processing. But also, she met his eyes steadily. I want to help. Hiding here while you do everything isn't enough. Dante was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. It's dangerous. These people have already threatened you once. I'm already in danger. At least let me do something useful. Isla leaned forward, intensity replacing fear. I'm a medical professional. I know how appointment systems work, how medical offices operate. I might see patterns your people would miss. She watched him consider it, saw the conflict playing across his features. His protective instinct was clearly warring with something else. Respect, maybe, or recognition that she had a point. Finally, he nodded. All right. I have appointment schedules from 3 of the practices, pulled from their servers overnight. You look for patterns while I coordinate surveillance on the doctors. But you stay here, you stay safe, and if I say we stop, we stop. Deal. Relief flooded through her, the need to do something, anything, overwhelming the fear. They spent the next several hours working side by side, Dante at his monitors while Isla studied appointment schedules on the tablet. The patterns emerged slowly, requiring her medical knowledge to interpret. Dr. Brennan scheduled his photo appointments always at end of day, never with a nurse present. The other doctors showed similar patterns, each slight variations, but the same underlying structure. Here, Isla said, pulling Dante's attention from his screens. Look at this scheduling gap. Every Tuesday and Thursday, Dr. Brennan blocks 3 hours mid-afternoon. No appointments, marked as administrative time. Dante moved to sit beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from his body. What's unusual about that? Most doctors would use that time for charting, catching up on paperwork. But he has a scribe service. His charts are done in real time. And it's the same block every week, which suggests scheduled activity rather than administrative catch-up. She pulled up another doctor's schedule. This one does it Friday mornings. Always the same time. Dante's eyes sharpened with understanding. Consistent meetings, coordination sessions, or scheduled photo processing, Isla suggested, her stomach turning at the thought. Uploading images, cataloging victims, preparing materials for sale. He made a call, issuing instructions in that same clipped Russian. When he finished, he looked at her with something close to admiration. Good catch. We'll have surveillance on those time blocks starting today. They worked through lunch without realizing it, until Dante's phone alarm went off. He glanced at the time and stood, moving toward the kitchen. You need to eat. So do you. Isla followed, watching as he pulled ingredients from the refrigerator. You cook a lot for someone who could afford private chefs. Learned it from my mother. Already told you that. He began assembling sandwiches with the same efficiency he applied to everything. She's very traditional about certain things. Her sons will not be helpless, she would say. Then she would make us cook entire meals while she supervised. How many brothers? 2. I'm the oldest. Dante's voice softened fractionally. Nikolai runs the logistics side of our operations. Dmitri is still in college, studying business. The glimpse into his family humanized him in ways Isla found both comforting and unsettling. She accepted the sandwich he handed her, sitting at the kitchen island. Tell me about your father. Dead 6 years now. Heart attack. Dante's expression was carefully neutral. He built a legitimate import business from nothing. Came here from Moscow with $500 and a work visa. Everything I have started with what he built. And you expanded it. In various directions, yes. Some he would approve of, some he wouldn't. But he taught me that power is the only real security in this world. The only way to protect what matters. Is that what this is about? Isla asked quietly. Using your power to protect people your sister couldn't be protected? Dante's hand stilled on his sandwich. His eyes met hers, and she saw pain there, carefully controlled but present. Partially. Also about making sure no one else experiences what she did. What happened to her? His jaw tightened. She was 19. Someone she trusted, an older man she thought cared about her, recorded intimate moments without her consent, used them to control her, to isolate her from family, to break down her self-worth until she believed she was worthless. She swallowed pills rather than face another day of it. Isla's chest ached. I'm sorry. So am I. Dante's voice was rough. I was 22. Thought I could fix everything, save everyone. Learned too late that some fights you lose. Since then, I've made sure I don't lose these fights anymore. The revelation explained so much about his intensity, his immediate protective response to her situation. This wasn't just business or even justice. It was personal in the deepest sense. Before she could respond, his phone rang. Not the normal ringtone, but something ridiculous and cheerful, completely at odds with everything about Dante Volkov. The sound of it, bouncy and electronic, made Isla blink in surprise. Dante's expression shifted to something almost sheepish. He glanced at the screen and answered. "Katia, I told you not to change my ringtone." A young woman's voice, bright with mischief, came through loud enough for Isla to hear. "But it's funny, and you're too serious all the time. Are you eating? Mama says you never eat." "I'm eating right now, as it happens." Despite everything, there was warmth in Dante's voice, a gentleness Isla hadn't heard before. "With someone?" The voice sharpened with interest. "Dante Volkov doesn't eat lunch." "Who is she?" "None of your business. Tell your mother I'm fine." He paused and changed the ringtone back. "Never." The girl's laughter was infectious. "Love you, cousin. Don't forget family dinner Sunday." The call ended, leaving Dante shaking his head. Isla tried to suppress her smile and failed. "Your cousin sounds delightful. She's 19 and thinks she's hilarious." He pocketed his phone, but there was affection in his expression. "My aunt's daughter. She sets ridiculous ringtones on everyone's phones when they're not looking. Says we all need to lighten up." The moment of levity felt precious, a break in the tension that had dominated since they met. Isla found herself relaxing fractionally, seeing past the dangerous protector to the man underneath who let his teenage cousin tease him. They returned to work, but something had shifted between them. The atmosphere felt less like victim and protector, more like partnership. Isla noticed other things too. The way Dante's focus was absolute when he worked, his fingers flying across keyboards with practiced precision. The way he took calls in multiple languages, switching effortlessly between English, Russian, and what might have been Italian. The strategic mind that could track dozens of moving pieces simultaneously. She was impressed despite herself. Whatever else he was, Dante Volkov was brilliant at what he did. The afternoon wore on, the light shifting across the harbor. Isla stretched, standing to ease muscles stiff from hours of sitting. As she reached for a new stack of documents Dante had printed, he reached for the same file. Their hands collided, his larger one warm against hers. The contact lasted a fraction too long. Isla's breath caught, awareness suddenly crackling between them. She looked up to find Dante watching her, those gray-green eyes intense in the afternoon light. Neither of them moved, the moment stretching. Then Dante withdrew his hand, clearing his throat. "Sorry." The word came out rough. Isla's heart was racing, her skin tingling where he'd touched her. This was inappropriate, she told herself. She barely knew him. He was dangerous. She was vulnerable. All the logical reasons stacked up, but her body didn't seem to care about logic. She forced herself to focus back on the documents, but concentration was suddenly impossible. She was hyper-aware of Dante's presence beside her, the controlled power in his movements, the careful distance he maintained that somehow made her more conscious of him rather than less. By early evening, Isla's eyes were burning from staring at screens and documents. She stood to stretch again, moved too quickly, and felt the room tilt with sudden dizziness. Dante's hand shot out, steadying her with a grip on her elbow. "When did you last eat?" "Lunch. The sandwich you made." Isla's voice came out breathier than intended, thrown by his proximity. "That was 6 hours ago." He kept his hand on her elbow, the touch simultaneously steadying and electrifying. "You need proper dinner." "I'm fine, really." But even as she said it, her stomach betrayed her with an audible growl. Dante's expression softened with something that might have been amusement. "Clearly. Come on, we'll take a break." But just as they moved toward the kitchen, his phone rang with an actual normal ringtone this time. He answered immediately, his entire demeanor shifting to business mode. "Talk to me." Isla watched his expression harden as he listened. "Yes." "Confirmed?" He glanced at her. "When?" Whatever the answer was, it made him nod sharply. "Set up surveillance. I want eyes on location by midnight. We move tomorrow night." Her pulse kicked up. "Tomorrow night?" Dante ended the call and turned to her fully. "My people confirmed your theory about the hotel. The Meridian, 2 blocks from Mass General. Shell Company rents a suite on the 10th floor every week, same days your doctor blocks his schedule. We've got enough to rate it. Relief and terror warred in Isla's chest. That's good. That's what we wanted. You wanted. I wanted more time to prepare. But we can't risk them moving locations. He studied her carefully. I'm going in tomorrow night with my team. You'll stay here where it's safe. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. I need to be there. Need to see it end. Isla, it's too dangerous. She stepped closer, meeting his gaze with all the determination she possessed. I need to face him. Dr. Brennan. I need to look him in the eye and know he can't hurt anyone else. You understand that, don't you? You understand needing to face the person who violated someone you care about? Dante's jaw worked, internal conflict visible in every line of his body. Finally, he exhaled roughly. You stay in the surveillance van with Alexei. You do not leave that van under any circumstances. You follow every instruction exactly. Understood? Understood. He held her gaze a moment longer, then nodded. We should prepare you. Basic safety protocols, what to expect. The training session that followed was torture in ways Isla hadn't anticipated. Dante was all business, showing her how to move, how to stay low, how to protect herself if everything went wrong. But that meant his hands on her waist, guiding her positioning. His body pressed against her back, demonstrating how to make herself a smaller target. His voice low near her ear, instructions delivered in that controlled tone that somehow made her hyper-aware of every point of contact. He was being entirely professional. She knew that, but her body wasn't being professional at all. It was responding to his proximity with embarrassing enthusiasm, her heart racing, her skin sensitized everywhere he touched. If someone grabs you from behind, Dante said, his arms coming around her in demonstration, you drive your elbow back into their solar plexus. Hard. Don't hesitate. Isla tried to focus on the instruction, but all she could think about was how solid he felt behind her, how easily his strength could overpower her if he wanted, how safe that made her feel instead of threatened. Try it, he said. Show me. She executed the move, her elbow stopping just short of actual contact with his chest. His hands on her arms steadied her, then released quickly as if he too felt the charge in the air. Good. You're stronger than you think. His voice had roughened slightly. That's enough for tonight. They stood there in the middle of his living room, both breathing slightly harder than the exercise warranted. The sun had set fully now, the city lights creating a glittering backdrop through the windows. Isla could see their reflection in the glass, close enough that another inch would bring them together. I should make dinner, Dante said, but he didn't move. I should help. Isla didn't move either. The moment stretched between them, laden with something neither seemed willing to name. Then Dante stepped back deliberately, breaking the spell. Tomorrow is going to be intense. We both need rest. He was right, of course. But Isla found herself disappointed anyway, which was ridiculous and inappropriate and entirely beyond her control. They prepared a quick meal together, moving around the kitchen in a dance that was becoming familiar. The domesticity of it struck Isla as bizarre. 2 days ago, she'd never met this man. Now they were cooking dinner together like it was routine, preparing for a raid on a criminal operation like it was just another day. After eating, they gravitated to the balcony despite the cold November air. The city stretched out below them, oblivious to the dramas playing out in penthouses and medical offices. Isla wrapped her arms around herself, the sweater insufficient against the chill. Dante disappeared briefly, returning with a jacket that he draped over her shoulders without comment. It swallowed her, several sizes too large, but wonderfully warm and carrying his scent. Can't sleep? He asked, leaning against the balcony railing beside her. Too wound up. Tomorrow night, if we find evidence, if we get him, what happens after? We turn everything over to federal authorities I have connections with. They'll make the arrests look clean, like standard investigation. The other doctors in the network will be monitored, picked up systematically. His voice was certain, controlled. This ends. And me? Do I testify? Go public as a victim? Only if you want to. Dante turned to look at her directly. You don't owe anyone your story. You've already been violated enough. The understanding in his words loosened something in Isla's chest. I feel like I should. Like other women need to know they're not alone. That's your choice. Either way, you're not in this alone anymore. His intensity was back, that focused attention that made her feel like the only person in his world. I meant what I said. I protect what's mine. Am I yours? The question emerged before wisdom could stop it. Dante's eyes darkened. You're under my protection. That's what I meant. But it wasn't. Isla could hear it in his voice. He'd meant something more, something neither of them was ready to acknowledge. The air between them crackled with unspoken possibility. You're not what I expected, she said quietly. When I saw you in that restaurant, you looked dangerous. Untouchable. But you're not really. I'm very dangerous, Isla. Don't make the mistake of thinking otherwise. But his voice was gentle, contradicting the warning. I don't feel afraid of you. I feel, she hesitated, searching for words, safer than I have in months. Which is insane because you're exactly the kind of person I should be terrified of. You should be. He moved closer, and she could see the conflict in his expression. I've done things that would horrify you. I'll do worse to the people who hurt you. That should terrify you. But it doesn't. Maybe something is wrong with me. Isla's heart was racing again, but not from fear. Nothing is wrong with you. You're in shock, processing trauma. Your judgment is compromised. Dante's control was cracking at the edges. She could hear it. Which is why I need to be the one with good judgment right now. He was right. She knew he was right. But knowing didn't change the pull she felt toward him. The way her body leaned into his proximity despite all the logical reasons not to. Dante reached out slowly, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin with unexpected gentleness. His touch was warm against the cold air, solid and real. After this is over, he said quietly, when the threat is gone and you've had time to process everything, if you still feel safe with me, we can talk about what this is. And if I don't? The question came out as a whisper. Then you walk away, and I make sure you're protected from a distance. His thumb traced her cheekbone. Either way, you're safe. That's non-negotiable. Isla's breath caught. She wanted to close the distance between them, wanted to test whether his lips were as firm as they looked, wanted to stop thinking and just feel for a moment. But before either of them could move, Dante's phone rang. He closed his eyes briefly, frustration flashing across his features, then stepped back to answer. What? The word was clipped, annoyed. Whatever the caller said made his expression sharpen. Confirmed? Multiple vehicles? He glanced at Isla, then back at the city. Understood. I'll be ready. He ended the call and pocketed the phone. That was Alexei. Final confirmation that tomorrow's operation is go. We have complete surveillance set up, backup teams positioned. So it's really happening. It's really happening. Dante's gaze was steady on hers. You should try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be long. He was right, but Isla didn't want to move, didn't want to break whatever this moment was. Eventually, though, the cold drove them inside. They stood in the hallway between their rooms, the space feeling charged with everything unsaid. Thank you, Isla said finally, for protecting me, for believing me, for making me feel like I have some control in this. You don't need to thank me for doing what's right. Dante's voice was rough. Get some sleep. I'll wake you when it's time. He disappeared into his room before she could respond, leaving Isla alone in the hallway. She returned to the guest room and lay in the too large bed, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow they would face the people who'd violated her. Tomorrow she would see justice beginning. Tomorrow everything might change again. But tonight, she lay awake thinking about the way Dante's hand had felt against her cheek, the barely restrained intensity in his eyes, the promise implicit in his words that this wasn't over between them. Her life had been shattered 48 hours ago, and somehow in the wreckage she'd found something unexpected, something that felt dangerously close to hope. The surveillance van was cramped and filled with electronic equipment that cast everything in a blue-green glow. Isla sat wedged between monitors and communication systems, trying to control her breathing while Alexei calmly checked weapons and equipment beside her. Outside, night had fallen over Boston, the Meridian Hotel rising a block away, its lit windows revealing nothing of the crimes happening inside. Dante's voice came through her earpiece, low and controlled. All teams in position. We breach in 3 minutes. Isla, you stay exactly where you are. She touched the small microphone clipped to her collar. Understood. Across from her, Alexei offered a slight smile. His scarred face looked even more severe in the harsh lighting, but his eyes were kind. Boss is very protective of you. I have not seen him like this in a long time. Like what? Isla's voice came out tighter than she intended, nerves making her stomach clench. Invested. Alexei checked his phone, monitoring something. Usually he is more, how do you say, detached? Professional. With you, He is different. Before Isla could respond to that unsettling observation, Dante's voice cut through the calm again. Moving in. All units, execute. The next few minutes unfolded in tense silence punctuated by terse communications. Isla heard footsteps, heard doors being breached, heard Dante's team moving through the hotel with military precision. Her hands clenched in her lap, nails digging into her palms. Suite secured. 3 subjects detained. Dante's voice held barely controlled fury. We have the evidence. Laptops, external drives, physical files. It's all here. Through the earpiece, Isla could hear other voices now. Dr. Brennan's voice, high and panicked, trying to explain, to bargain. She felt her stomach turn, while rising in her throat. That voice had told her to relax during examinations, had assured her that the photographs were standard medical practice, had violated her trust with practiced ease. Dante's response was ice cold. Stop talking. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. Boss, this is Victor. We have a problem. One of the subjects is making threats. Says there are bigger players who will retaliate. Says taking him down exposes the witness to danger. Isla's breath caught. She'd known intellectually that Dr. Brennan wasn't operating alone, but hearing it confirmed sent fresh fear coursing through her. Alexei touched her shoulder gently. Breathe. Boss will handle it. Dante's voice came through again, and this time Isla could hear the dangerous edge beneath the control. Bring him down. We're taking him to the van. Our witness deserves to see the man who violated her in custody. 5 minutes later, the van's rear doors opened. Dante climbed in first, followed by 2 of his team members dragging a handcuffed Dr. Brennan between them. The doctor's professional veneer had cracked completely. His face was pale, sweat beading on his forehead, his expensive shirt rumpled. Isla stood on shaking legs, forcing herself to meet his eyes. In the medical office, he'd always seemed so authoritative, so competent. Now he looked small and pathetic, fear making him almost unrecognizable. Miss Thorne, Dr. Brennan's voice cracked. Please, you have to understand, I never meant for anyone to get hurt. It was just supposed to be. I needed the money. The practice was struggling. The excuses made something hot and sharp flare in Isla's chest, burning through the fear. You took photographs of me without my consent. Sold them. Violated dozens, maybe hundreds of women. And you think you can justify that with financial problems? Dante moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Her voice didn't waver as she continued. I trusted you. I came to you for medical care, and you exploited that trust in the most vile way possible. So no, I don't understand. I don't accept your excuses. And I hope you spend the rest of your life regretting every choice that brought you here. Dr. Brennan's face crumpled. The others, the organization, they'll come after you. After everyone who knows. You don't understand what you've started. Dante's hand settled on Isla's lower back, protective and grounding. She does understand. And she's braver than you'll ever be. He nodded to his men. Get him out of here. Federal agents are 2 blocks away, ready to take custody. Make sure the evidence transfer is clean. They hauled Dr. Brennan out of the van, his protests fading as they moved away. Isla stood there, adrenaline still coursing through her, making her hands shake and her heart race. She'd faced him. She'd looked her abuser in the eyes and refused to be diminished by him. The victory felt hollow, though, because his warning echoed in her mind. The others, the organization, higher powers who would retaliate. You're safe, Dante said quietly, as if reading her thoughts. Whatever comes next, I'll handle it. He comes after one person, you get a dozen, Alexei added from his position at the monitors. Boss does not lose. Isla wanted to believe them, wanted to feel the security their certainty offered. But fear was clawing at her chest, making it hard to breathe. Everything felt too close, too immediate. We need to leave, Dante said. Alexei, coordinate with Victor on the federal handoff. Make sure our methods stay buried. He touched Isla's elbow. Come on. Let's get you home. Home. He meant the penthouse, the space that had become her sanctuary over the past few days. Isla let him guide her out of the van and into a waiting black SUV. The drive back was silent, tension radiating from Dante in waves she could feel even without touching him. Inside the penthouse, the familiar space felt different. The city lights that had seemed beautiful now felt exposing. The windows that provided such spectacular views suddenly seemed vulnerable. Isla stood in the middle of the living room, her whole body beginning to shake as the adrenaline finally crashed. Isla. Dante's voice was gentle, worried. Talk to me. I thought. She started, her voice cracking. I thought facing him would make it better. Would give me closure or power or something. But all I feel is, the words caught in her throat. All I feel is violated all over again. And now there are more of them. More people who want to hurt me for exposing this. The tears came suddenly, overwhelming force that she couldn't control. Isla pressed her hands to her face, embarrassed by the breakdown, but unable to stop it. She was crying for herself, for all the other victims, for the trust that had been shattered, for the fear that she couldn't seem to shake. Strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her against a solid chest. Dante held her while she sobbed, one hand cradling her head, the other wrapped around her waist. He didn't offer empty platitudes or tell her everything would be fine. He just held her, steady and present, letting her break apart in the safety of his strength. I'm sorry, Islam managed eventually, her voice muffled against his sweater. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be falling apart like this. You have nothing to apologize for. Dante's voice was rough with emotion. You were brave tonight. Facing him took more courage than most people possess. This reaction is normal, it's healthy. You're processing trauma. His sister. She realized suddenly why he understood this so well, why he knew exactly what to say and not say. Tell me about her. Please. I need to understand why you're doing this. Dante tensed against her, and for a moment Isla thought he would refuse. But then he guided her to the couch, settling them both on the soft cushions with her still held against his chest. His heartbeat was steady beneath her ear, grounding in its consistency. Her name was Anya, he said finally. She was my baby sister, 7 years younger than me. Beautiful, brilliant, wanted to be a doctor. He paused, and Isla felt his chest rise and fall with careful breathing. When she was 19, she started dating a teaching assistant at her university. Marcus. He was 28, seemed mature and stable. We all thought he was good for her. What happened? Isla asked quietly. He recorded them together. Intimate moments. She didn't know. Dante's voice was hollow, distant. When she tried to break up with him, he threatened to release the videos, to send them to her family, to the university, to everyone. She was terrified, trapped. He used that fear to control her, isolate her from everyone who loved her. Isla could hear the pain beneath the controlled words, could feel the tension in Dante's body. She tilted her head up to look at him, found his jaw clenched, his eyes staring at nothing. For 6 months, he controlled every aspect of her life. Made her believe she was worthless, that she deserved the treatment. Made her think no one would love her if they knew what she'd done. His hands tightened on Isla. I knew something was wrong, but she wouldn't tell me. Wouldn't let me help. How did you find out? She left a note. Explained everything before she swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills. Dante's voice cracked. I was 22. Thought I was invincible. Thought I could protect everyone I loved. I found her, but it was too late. She died in my arms while we waited for the ambulance. Oh God. Isla's heart shattered for him, for the young man who'd lost his sister, for the guilt he clearly still carried. Dante, that wasn't your fault. I should have seen it. Should have pushed harder when I knew something was wrong. His arms tightened around her. So I made myself into someone who could see these things, who could stop them. I built power and resources and connections so that I would never be helpless again, never fail to protect someone again. The pieces clicked into place. His empire built partially on the need to prevent others from suffering what his sister had endured. His immediate protective response to Isla's situation. The personal fury with which he pursued these cases. You're not failing me, Isla said firmly. You saved me. You believed me, protected me, helped me fight back. Because of you, Dr. Brennan and his partners are going to face justice. Other women will be protected. But there are more. He met her eyes, and she saw the fear there, carefully controlled but present. The organization he mentioned. People who see you as a threat now. Then we face them together. Isla shifted to cup his face with both hands, forcing him to hold her gaze. I'm not your sister. I'm not facing this alone because I have you. And I'm choosing to trust that, choosing to believe you when you say you'll keep me safe. Something shifted in Dante's expression, the careful control cracking to reveal raw emotion. You terrify me. The admission came out rough. I barely know you and you've become. He stopped, searching for words. You matter. More than you should for someone I met 3 days ago. Isla's heart was racing again, but not from fear this time. You matter to me too. You've shown me kindness and protection when you didn't have to. You've made me feel safe when everything else in my world was terrifying. The space between them felt charged, electric with possibility. Dante's hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his cheek. I should let you rest. You've had a traumatic night. I'm tired of being sensible. Isla's voice was barely a whisper. Tired of being afraid. For once, I just want to feel something besides violated and scared. Isla, you're vulnerable right now. Your judgment is compromised. I won't take advantage of that. Despite the words, his thumb stroked across her wrist where he held her hand, betraying his own struggle. I know exactly what I'm doing. She leaned closer, her eyes never leaving his. I'm choosing this. Choosing you. Not because you saved me, but because I see who you are. The man who cooks dinner and lets his cousin set ridiculous ringtones. The man who's dedicated his life to protecting people who can't protect themselves. The man who held me while I cried and understood exactly what I needed. Dante's control was fracturing. She could see it in the way his eyes darkened, the way his breathing quickened. If we do this, if we cross this line, everything changes. Maybe everything already changed. Maybe it changed the moment our eyes met in that restaurant. Isla closed the remaining distance, her lips brushing against his. Maybe I'm tired of fighting what I feel. For one breathless moment, Dante remained still. Then his restraint shattered. His hand slid into her hair, angling her head as he kissed her properly, deeply, with all the intensity she'd sensed beneath his controlled exterior. It was desperate and searching, a connection forged through shared trauma and unexpected understanding. Isla responded with equal fervor, her hands fisting in his sweater, pulling him closer. The kiss was everything she'd imagined and more. Heat and promise and a rightness that defied logic. His lips were firm but gentle, demanding but careful, taking what she offered while still protecting her. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Dante rested his forehead against hers. We should stop. You need rest, time to process everything. I know what I need. Isla's voice was steady despite her racing heart. And right now, I need to feel alive. Need to feel something good after days of feeling violated and afraid. He pulled back enough to look at her, his gray-green eyes searching hers with intensity that made her breath catch. If we do this, we do it right. Not because you're grateful or scared or processing trauma. Because you want this. Want me. I do want this. Want you. The truth of it resonated through her. I didn't plan on this. Didn't expect to meet someone like you under these circumstances. But here we are. And I'm done pretending I don't feel what I feel. Dante's expression softened, vulnerability showing through the cracks in his armor. I want you to. Have since the moment you walked over to my table, terrified but determined to understand. But I need you to know, if we do this, I'm all in. I don't do casual. Neither do I. Islam managed a slight smile despite the intensity of the moment. I'm a relationship person who happens to be falling for a man who admits to criminal connections and solves problems with methods I probably don't want to know about. My judgment might actually be questionable. A ghost of amusement crossed his face. Definitely questionable. He sobered quickly. But I promise you this. I will never lie to you, never hurt you, never use my power against you. You will always be safe with me. I believe you. And she did, with a certainty that defied every logical reason to be cautious. They kissed again, slower this time, but no less intense. Dante's hands were careful on her, respectful even in passion. When he finally pulled back, they were both breathing hard. We should stop here, he said, voice rough. You're exhausted, emotionally drained. Let's not make decisions we might regret. Isla wanted to argue, wanted to push forward into the heat building between them. But she could see the wisdom in his restraint, could recognize that her emotions were indeed running high after the night's events. Okay, the agreement came reluctantly. But we're not pretending this didn't happen. We're not going back to careful distance and professional boundaries. Agreed. Dante stood, pulling her up with him. But we do this right. We acknowledge what this is, and we take our time building it properly. What is this? Isla needed to hear him say it. He cupped her face with both hands, his touch gentle. This is me choosing you. Choosing to let you into the parts of myself I keep protected. Choosing to build something real with someone who sees who I actually am. Isla's chest ached with emotion, tears threatening again, but for entirely different reasons. I choose you too. Choose to trust you even though logic says I shouldn't. Choose to see past the danger to the man underneath. They stood there in the middle of his penthouse, the city glittering below them, both understanding that something fundamental had shifted. The line between protector and protected had blurred into something more complex, more real. Come on, Dante said finally. You need sleep. Real sleep, not the restless, anxious sleep you've been getting. He guided her toward her room, but at the doorway, Isla turned back. I don't want to be alone tonight. Not asking for anything more than presence. But I need. She struggled to articulate the need. I need to not feel alone. Dante studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Get changed. I'll be right back. Isla put on sleep clothes with shaking hands. The adrenaline fully crashed now, leaving her exhausted and wrung out. When Dante returned, he'd changed into sleep pants and a t-shirt, looking more human and approachable than she'd yet seen him. They settled on top of the covers, Isla tucked against his side, her head on his chest, his arms secure around her. The position was intimate but chaste, comfort rather than passion. Thank you, she whispered. For everything. For believing me, protecting me, showing me I can still trust. You don't need to thank me for being a decent human being. His voice rumbled in his chest beneath her ear. But you're welcome anyway. Tell me about something good. Something that has nothing to do with medical exploitation or criminal organizations. I need to think about something normal. Dante was quiet for a moment, then began talking about his family. His mother who insisted on Sunday dinners and criticized his lack of a girlfriend. His brother Nikolai who ran logistics and had 3 young children who treated Dante like a jungle gym. His youngest brother Dmitri who was finishing business school and drove their mother crazy with his impractical dreams. His cousin Katia who was a brilliant artist but insisted on spending her time playing pranks. Isla listened to the stories, heard the love beneath the exasperation, imagined the family dinners and holiday gatherings. It painted a picture of Dante that reconciled the dangerous man with the protective son and devoted brother. They sound wonderful, she said when he finished. I'd like to meet them someday. She felt him tense slightly, then relax. You will. When this is over and you're safe, I'll introduce you properly. Prepare yourself for interrogation from my mother. She has opinions about who her sons spend time with. I look forward to it. Isla meant it. The idea of a future beyond the immediate crisis, beyond the fear and violation, felt like hope. Sleep, Dante murmured, his hand stroking soothingly through her hair. I've got you. Nothing will hurt you while I'm here. For the first time in days, Isla believed it completely. She let her eyes close, let exhaustion pull her under, safe in the knowledge that this man who terrified her enemies made her feel more protected than she'd ever felt in her life. Her last conscious thought was that 3 days ago, her biggest concern had been affording new running shoes. Now she was falling asleep in the arms of a man who operated outside the law, who'd dedicated his life to protecting others, who'd somehow become essential to her in an impossibly short time. The situation was insane, illogical, potentially dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with criminal organizations and everything to do with her vulnerable heart. But as Dante's steady heartbeat lulled her toward sleep, Isla found she didn't care about logic. She cared about this moment, this man, this unexpected connection forged in crisis. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And for now, that was enough. Isla woke to voices in the other room, urgent and tense. Gray morning light filtered through the windows, and Dante's side of the bed was empty, the sheets already cool. She grabbed a robe and emerged to find him in the living room with Alexei and 2 other men, all of them studying tablets and speaking in rapid Russian. Dante looked up as she approached, his expression grim. We have a problem. Her stomach dropped. What happened? Alexei answered, his accent thick with stress. Warehouse in Dorchester was hit last night. 3 in the morning. Professional team, coordinated assault. They knew exactly where our security cameras were positioned. Any casualties? Isla's nursing instincts kicked in immediately. 2 of our men injured, nothing life-threatening. But the message is clear. Dante's jaw was tight, with controlled fury. Taking down Dr. Brennan and exposing the operation made someone very angry. They're retaliating. One of the other men, Victor, pulled up security footage on his tablet. Look at this. The attackers were trained, military precision. This wasn't random criminals. This was a statement. Islam moved closer to Dante, his presence grounding despite the fear coursing through her. Do we know who ordered it? Dante nodded sharply. We've been tracking communications all night. The operation runs deeper than we thought. The man at the top is named Kozlov. Viktor Kozlov. He's been running medical exploitation rings across multiple cities for years, maybe a decade. Dr. Brennan was just one spoke in a much larger wheel. How many cities? Isla asked, horror dawning. At least 7 that we've confirmed. Boston, New York, Philadelphia, D.C., Miami. Thousands of victims. The scale of it made Dante's voice rough with barely contained rage. And now he knows we're coming for him. The men continued their discussion, pulling up maps and intelligence reports. Isla watched Dante in his element, commanding his team with absolute authority. He'd changed from the man who'd held her last night. The vulnerability replaced with the dangerous operator she'd first glimpsed in that restaurant. A plan emerged over the next hour. Intelligence suggested Kozlov was preparing to flee the country, spooked by the raid on Dr. Brennan's operation. He owned an estate outside Boston, in a wealthy suburb that provided both isolation and legitimacy. If they were going to move, it had to be soon. I want full tactical team, Dante said. Coordinate with our contacts in federal law enforcement. This needs to look clean when it's over. He glanced at Isla, and I want her somewhere completely secure. Not here, not anywhere connected to me. Somewhere Kozlov can't find her even if everything goes wrong. Isla's spine straightened. No, absolutely not. Dante's eyes narrowed. This isn't negotiable. These people tried to destroy my warehouse as a warning. They won't hesitate to target you directly, which is exactly why I'm not running away to hide. Isla stepped closer, meeting his gaze with steel in her own. You include me in this, or I'll find a way to be involved anyway. The room went silent, the other men suddenly finding reasons to study their equipment. Dante's expression was thunderous. You are not risking your life because of some misguided sense of obligation. This isn't about obligation. This is about refusing to be a victim anymore. Isla kept her voice level despite the anger rising. You taught me that. You showed me I could fight back. Now you want me to hide while you finish what we started together? We started nothing together. I'm finishing what these criminals started when they violated you and hundreds of other women. His voice was hard, cold, the tone of a man used to being obeyed. You're doing it again, Isla said quietly. Trying to protect me by pushing me away. Just like you couldn't save Anya. So now you'll keep everyone at arm's length where they can't get hurt. Dante flinched as if she'd struck him. Low blow. Truth. She softened her tone. I'm not your sister. I'm not 19 and isolated and controlled by someone who wants to hurt me. I'm choosing to stand beside you, to face this together, because that's what partners do. Partners. The words seemed to hit him differently. He studied her for a long moment. Internal conflict visible in every line of his body. If I lose you because I let you into danger, I will never forgive myself. And if you push me away to keep me safe, you lose me anyway. Isla reached for his hand. I see who you are, Dante. All of it. The danger and the protection and the man who's terrified of caring too much. I'm choosing it all, but I need you to let me make that choice. The silence stretched. Finally, Dante exhaled roughly. You stay with Alexei in a secure location. You monitor communications only. If anything goes wrong, he gets you out immediately. No arguments, no heroics. Agreed. Relief flooded through her. Alexei cleared his throat. I will guard her with my life, boss. You have my word. The next several hours were a blur of preparation. Intelligence came in confirming Kozlov was indeed planning to leave the country within 48 hours. His estate was heavily guarded, but vulnerable in ways Dante's team could exploit. The window was closing. By late afternoon, they were moving. Isla was outfitted with body armor under her clothes and a communication device. She rode with Alexei in an unmarked van, positioned a mile from Kozlov's estate in a location that provided clear sight lines but maximum protection. This is insane, Alexei said conversationally as he set up monitoring equipment. Boss is in love with you. Has not been in love since, well, ever that I have seen. And here you are, in tactical gear, helping take down criminal organization. Isla's cheeks flushed. He's not in love with me. We barely know each other. Alexei snorted. I have known him 15 years. Watched him build empire, take down enemies, Protect family. Never has he looked at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you are most precious and most terrifying thing in his world. Before she could respond, Dante's voice came through the comm, all teams in position. We move in 5 minutes. Isla, you hear me? I hear you. Her voice was steady despite her racing heart. If this goes wrong, if you hear anything that sounds like retreat, Alexei gets you out. You don't wait for me. You don't try to help. You survive. That's an order. Understood. Then, softer, be safe. Always am. She could hear the ghost of a smile in his voice. Wait for me. We have things to discuss when this is over. The assault was fast and professional. Through the communications, Isla heard Dante's team breach the estate, heard the brief exchange of gunfire, heard orders being called in multiple languages. Her hands clenched on the edge of her seat, every instinct screaming to do something, anything, instead of sitting uselessly in a van. East Wing secured. 3 hostiles down, non-lethal. That was Victor's voice. West Wing clear. Dante's voice, controlled and cold. Moving to main house. Contact, shots fired. Unknown voice, urgent. Isla's breath caught. She met Alexei's eyes and saw her own fear reflected there. The next minute was an eternity of unclear communications and muffled sounds. Then Dante's voice cut through, sharp and clear. Target secured. Kozlov is in custody. All teams report. One by one, voices confirmed safety. 2 minor injuries, nothing critical. The operation had taken less than 20 minutes from breach to secure. Isla sagged in her seat, relief making her lightheaded. Alexei squeezed her shoulder. See, boss always wins. They waited another 30 minutes while Dante's team processed the scene. Federal agents arrived, the handoff carefully orchestrated to protect Dante's methods while ensuring legal proceedings would follow. Finally, Dante's voice came through the comm, and this time the ice in his tone had melted. It's over, Isla. It's really over. You're safe. She heard the raw relief, the vulnerability beneath the words. Are you hurt? Barely a scratch. His voice roughened. I'm coming to you. Stay where you are. 10 minutes later, an SUV pulled up beside the van. Dante climbed out, and Isla was moving before conscious thought, throwing herself into his arms. He caught her easily, his embrace fierce and protective. She could feel him trembling slightly, the adrenaline crash combining with emotional release. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. You're safe. It's over. They stood there in the growing dusk, holding each other while his team efficiently managed the aftermath. When they finally pulled apart, Dante cupped her face, his thumbs brushing away tears she hadn't realized were falling. Let's go home, he said softly. The drive back to the penthouse felt different. Lighter somehow, despite the exhaustion weighing on both of them. The threat that had dominated their every interaction was gone. Dr. Brennan was in federal custody. Kozlov had been captured with enough evidence to dismantle the entire operation. Other doctors in the network would be arrested systematically. Justice was happening. Finally, inside the penthouse, Isla felt the reality settling over her. It was truly over. The danger, the fear, the violation, all of it was moving into the past tense. She turned to find Dante watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. What happens now? Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Now we figure out what this is. What we are. He moved closer, not touching but near enough that she could feel his presence. You don't have to stay here anymore. The threat is gone. You can return to your life, your apartment, your work. Is that what you want? For me to leave? God, no. The admission came out rough, honest. But I need you to choose this clearly. Not because I protected you, or because you're grateful, or because the danger made everything intense. I need you to choose me knowing exactly what you're getting into. I know what I'm getting into. Isla closed the distance between them, her hands resting on his chest. I'm choosing a man who operates in gray areas, who has connections to people most would call criminals, who solves problems with methods I probably don't want details about. I'm choosing someone who showed me kindness when I was at my most vulnerable, who believed me without question, who dedicated himself to protecting me and hundreds of other women. He covered her hands with his own. I come with complications, family obligations, business that isn't always legal, enemies who would use you to hurt me. Your life won't be simple. My life stopped being simple the moment I saw those photographs. Islam managed a slight smile. At least this way, The complications come with someone who makes me feel safer and more seen than anyone ever has. Dante's expression softened, vulnerability showing through the careful control. You terrify me. The depth of what I feel for you, how quickly it happened, how essential you've become. I haven't let anyone this close in a decade. I'm terrified too, Isla admitted. But I'm done letting fear make my decisions. I choose this. Choose you. Choose us. The kiss was inevitable, necessary, a claiming and promise all at once. Dante's hands slid into her hair, angling her head as he deepened the connection. Isla responded with equal fervor, her body pressing against his, seeking the closeness they denied themselves for days. Are you sure? Dante pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. We can wait. Take more time. I'm sure. Her voice was steady, certain. I want this. Want you. Want to feel something good after days of feeling violated and afraid. He searched her face for a long moment, then swept her into his arms with unexpected ease. Isla laughed, startled and delighted, as he carried her down the hallway to his bedroom. Unlike the impersonal guest room, this space bore marks of the man himself. Books in Russian and English, photographs of family, the subtle scent of his cologne. Dante set her down gently, his hands cupping her face. If anything feels wrong, if you need to stop, you tell me. Your comfort, your consent, matters more than anything. The care in his words, the way he prioritized her experience even now, made Isla's heart ache. I trust you. Completely. What followed was tender and consuming, passion tempered with care. Dante took his time, learning her body with reverent attention, checking in with quiet questions and heated looks. Isla responded with her own exploration, discovering the scars on his shoulder and ribs, the strength in his back, the way his breathing changed when she touched certain places. The physical connection was profound, but it was the emotional intimacy that overwhelmed her. The way he watched her face, ensuring her pleasure. The gentleness in his touch despite the obvious desire. The whispered words in Russian and English that sounded like prayers and promises. This wasn't just physical release. This was choosing each other, claiming each other, building something real from the ashes of trauma. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, skin against skin, heartbeats gradually slowing. Dante's hand traced lazy patterns on her back, while Isla rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm beneath her ear. I love you, Dante said quietly. I know it's fast. Know we're still learning each other, but I need you to know. This isn't casual for me. You're not temporary. Isla tilted her head up to meet his gaze. I love you too. Maybe I'm crazy, maybe my judgment is questionable, but I know what I feel. You're not just the man who saved me. You're the man I want beside me. His arms tightened around her. Move in with me, not as someone under protection, but as my partner. Build a life here with me. The offer should have felt too fast, too soon. But looking into his gray-green eyes, Isla found she wanted nothing more. Yes, but I need to do this right. Need to return to work, maintain my independence, not lose myself in you. I wouldn't want you to lose yourself. Dante's thumb stroked her cheekbone. I fell in love with a woman who's strong and determined and brave. I want that woman, all of her, not some diminished version who gave up her identity for me. Then yes. Isla smiled, genuine and hopeful. I'll move in, build a life with you, figure out how to integrate your world with mine. They talked deep into the night, planning a future that felt impossibly bright after days of darkness. Dante explained his family, warned her about his mother's intensity and his brother's protectiveness. Isla shared her own history, her small family, her dreams for her career. They navigated the practicalities of combining lives that had been separate days ago. As dawn approached, Isla finally felt the exhaustion pulling at her. Dante tucked her against his side, his presence solid and reassuring. Sleep, he murmured. When you wake up, we'll start figuring out the rest of our lives. Isla let her eyes close, safe and loved and hopeful in ways she couldn't have imagined a week ago. Her life had been shattered by violation and fear. But from those pieces, she'd found something unexpected. Someone who saw her strength, protected her vulnerability, and loved her with an intensity that promised forever. The future stretched ahead, uncertain in its details, but certain in one thing. Whatever came next, they would face it together. 6 months later, Isla stood in her office at Boston Children's Hospital, adjusting the camera angle for her video testimony. The new pediatric wing stretched beyond her window, gleaming glass and state-of-the-art equipment funded by the Volkov Foundation. Dante had made the donation quietly, refusing any public recognition, but Isla knew it was his way of using his resources for undeniable good. The prosecutor's face filled her screen, professional and encouraging. "Miss Thorne, thank you for your testimony today. I know this hasn't been easy, but your willingness to speak publicly has given countless other victims the courage to come forward." Isla nodded, her composure steady. She'd spent months processing the trauma. Working with a therapist Dante had helped her find, transforming from victim to survivor to advocate. "I want other women to know they're not alone. That what happened wasn't their fault. That there is justice and healing on the other side of violation." The testimony lasted another hour, detailing her experiences with Dr. Brennan, identifying evidence, confirming the systematic nature of the exploitation. When it finally ended, Isla logged off and sagged in her chair, emotionally drained but also lighter. This was the final piece. The trials were concluding, the network dismantled, the doctors facing decades in prison. A knock on her door pulled her attention. Dante leaned against the frame, devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit, his eyes warm with pride and love. "How did it go?" "It's done." Isla stood, moving into his embrace. "Really, truly done." He held her close, one hand cradling her head. "I'm proud of you. What you did today, what you've been doing these past months, it matters. You're saving lives by giving others the courage to speak up. We're saving lives." She pulled back to look at him. "The foundation, the Safe House Network, the advocacy programs. That's both of us. Partners," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Now, are you ready for tonight?" Isla raised an eyebrow. "You've been mysterious about this surprise all week. Should I be worried?" "Only if you're afraid of my family." His expression was wry. "Mother has been cooking for 2 days. I suspect interrogation disguised as dinner." They drove to his mother's home in Brookline, a large house that somehow managed to feel cozy despite its size. The moment they walked in, Isla was enveloped in the chaos of the Volkov family. Dante's mother, Svetlana, pulled her into a fierce hug that smelled of vanilla and spices. His brothers shouted greetings from the kitchen. His cousin Katia dragged her toward the living room where nieces and nephews were playing. This was her life now. Not just Dante, but his entire boisterous, loving, slightly overwhelming family who had welcomed her completely. They'd accepted her without question once Dante made clear she was permanent, treating her like she'd always belonged. Dinner was loud and warm, multiple conversations happening simultaneously in English and Russian. Isla had been learning Russian, could now follow basic conversations and respond haltingly. It delighted Svetlana, who'd taken to teaching her family recipes and stories about Dante's childhood that made him groan with embarrassment. After the meal, while the younger cousins were distracted with dessert, Svetlana caught Isla's hand. "Walk with me, dear." They strolled through the garden, early November cold but clear. Svetlana was quiet for a moment, then spoke. "My son is different since you. Lighter. He carries so much, always has. But with you he remembers how to be just Dante, not protector of everyone." Isla's throat tightened with emotion. "He's given me so much. Safety, love, purpose." "No, child." Svetlana squeezed her hand. "You gave him those things too. After Anya died, he closed himself off. Built walls so high I worried I would never see my real son again. You climbed those walls and brought him back to us." Inside, through the windows, Isla could see Dante with his nieces, letting them climb on him while he pretended to be a dragon or monster, his face alight with joy. The contrast to the dangerous man she'd first met was stark and beautiful. "I love him," Isla said simply. "More than I thought possible. I know. And he loves you with everything he is." Svetlana's eyes were knowing. "Which is why I think tonight will be special." Before Isla could ask what that meant, Dante appeared at the door, catching her eye with a slight smile. "Ready to go?" They said their goodbyes amid promises to return for Sunday dinner, endured teasing about when wedding invitations would arrive, and finally escaped into the cool night air. Instead of heading to the car, Dante guided her toward a small park nearby. "Where are we going?" Isla asked, curious and slightly suspicious. "You'll see." His hand was warm in hers, steady and sure. The park was quiet, most people sensibly inside on the cold November evening. Dante led her to a gazebo overlooking a small pond. Fairy lights strung around the structure, creating a soft glow. It was beautiful and clearly deliberate. Isla's heart began racing. Dante, what is this? He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. 6 months ago, my entire world changed in a restaurant when I looked up and saw you recognizing those photographs. I went from investigating a crime to meeting the woman who would become everything to me. Dante. Her voice came out breathless. You've given me things I thought I'd lost forever. Hope, trust, the belief that I could love someone without losing them to the darkness I fight. You've made my life fuller, richer, better in every way. His gray-green eyes were intense in the soft light. I want to spend the rest of my life making you as happy as you make me. He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Isla Thorne, will you marry me? The ring was stunning, elegant without being ostentatious, a sapphire surrounded by diamonds that caught the fairy lights. But Isla barely registered the details because her vision was blurring with tears. Yes. The word came out choked with emotion. Yes, absolutely yes. Dante's relief was visible as he slid the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted of happiness and promise and a future she'd never imagined 6 months ago. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling through tears. Your mother knew, Isla accused playfully. That's what she meant about tonight being special. Everyone knew. He grinned, looking younger and less burdened than she'd ever seen him. I asked your parents' permission last week when we visited them in New Hampshire. Asked my brothers for advice on rings. Katia helped me plan this setup. The entire family has been in on it. Isla laughed, joy bubbling through her. So much for your reputation as someone who operates alone. You ruined that reputation. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin. You made me want partnership, family, a life beyond just protection and control. You made me want everything. They stood in the gazebo as the night deepened around them, talking about the future they would build together. Isla shared her dreams of expanding the Foundation's work, creating comprehensive support systems for exploitation victims. Dante promised his resources, his connections, his complete support for her mission. They talked about the wedding, laughing at Svetlana's already ambitious plans. Discussed children someday, when they were ready. Mapped out a future that felt impossibly bright. We should get home, Dante said eventually, though neither moved. It's freezing and I want you somewhere warm. Home. Isla loved how naturally the word came now. The penthouse had transformed over the past 3 months since she'd officially moved in. Her books filled the shelves, her plants lined the windows. Her warmth had seeped into every impersonal corner. It was theirs now, not just his. The drive back was quiet, comfortable, hands linked between them. Inside the penthouse, the city lights created their familiar glittering backdrop. Isla kicked off her shoes, admiring the way her engagement ring caught the light. Dante pulled her close, and they swayed together in the middle of the living room. No music needed. I love you, he murmured against her hair. Thank you for saying yes, for choosing this life with me, for making me believe in happiness again. I love you too. Isla tilted her head back to meet his gaze. Thank you for seeing me, for protecting me, for showing me what real partnership looks like. They made their way to bed, the space that had become their sanctuary. Lying tangled together, Isla's hand with its new ring resting on Dante's chest, she felt completely at peace. Alexei asked me about expanding the safe house network, Dante said into the comfortable silence. Wants to set up locations in 3 more cities, provide immediate protection for victims who come forward. I've been designing the support programs, Isla replied. Medical care, therapy, legal advocacy, job training. Everything victims need to rebuild their lives. We could coordinate it all through the Foundation. His hand stroked through her hair. Look at us, building an empire of protection and healing. From trauma to purpose. Isla smiled against his chest. We took the worst thing that happened and turned it into something that helps others. That feels like winning. We are winning. Dante's voice was certain. Every day with you is winning. Isla thought about the journey that had brought them here. That terrifying night in the restaurant when her world had shattered. The violation and fear and uncertainty. The unexpected protector who'd become so much more. The investigation, the danger, the choice to trust despite every logical reason not to. She thought about all the women they were helping now, Victims who found safety and support through programs funded by Dante's resources and shaped by her understanding. Thought about the difference they were making together. Have you ever wondered, Isla said quietly, how one terrible moment can lead to something beautiful? 6 months ago, I thought my life was ending. I felt violated and terrified and completely lost. But that moment, as horrible as it was, led me to you. I think about it constantly. Dante's arms tightened around her. I was investigating a crime and found my future. Sometimes I feel guilty for being grateful for something that caused you so much pain. Don't. The pain was real. The violation was real. But so is this. What we built from it. She pressed a kiss over his heart. We took darkness and made light. That's not something to feel guilty about. They fell into peaceful silence, the kind that only comes when two people are completely comfortable with each other. Outside, Boston continued its endless rhythm, oblivious to the quiet happiness in a penthouse overlooking the harbor. Maybe you're watching this and wondering if trust is worth the risk after you've been hurt. Let me tell you something I've learned. The wrong person will take your trust and weaponize it. But the right person will take that same trust and build something beautiful with it. The wrong person saw my vulnerability and exploited it. The right person saw my vulnerability and protected it. I trusted the wrong man in that medical office. That betrayal led me to the right man in that restaurant. And together, we turned trauma into purpose, pain into protection for others, violation into a foundation that saves lives. Isla shifted to look at Dante's face, relaxed in sleep, the dangerous edges softened. This man who'd seemed so terrifying had become her safety, her home, her partner in every sense. They'd built something real from impossible circumstances, transformed darkness into light, created meaning from pain. Her engagement ring caught the moonlight streaming through the windows. In a few months, she would marry this man. They would continue their work protecting others, expanding the foundation, using Dante's power and her compassion to make real differences. They would build a family, create a life, face whatever came together. 6 months ago, her biggest concern had been affording new running shoes. Now she was engaged to a man who operated in shadows but loved her in light, who'd dedicated his life to protecting the vulnerable, who'd given her back her sense of safety and shown her what real partnership meant. The journey from that restaurant to this moment had been terrifying and transforming. But lying in Dante's arms, wearing his ring, building a future dedicated to helping others, Isla wouldn't change a single moment. Because sometimes the darkest nights lead to the brightest mornings. Sometimes the worst violations lead to the most powerful healing. And sometimes, the wrong person's betrayal leads you directly to the right person's love. She settled back against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear, and let herself believe in the future they were building. A future of purpose and protection, love and partnership, healing spreading from their own wounds to help others. It was more than she'd ever imagined. And it was only the beginning.